So, welcome back to my channel, you guys. I know you've probably missed me, and I'm so sorry that it's taken me so long to get a video out, but I'm here, and today we're talking about the history of Friday the 13th. What makes it so unlucky? What makes it so scary? All the things in history that have happened on Friday the 13th, and all that fun stuff. We're going to go over that today. While I do that, I put makeup on my face. If you want to know what I use, I'll list it down below. And also, my name is Brandy, and this is what I do, is I talk about history of witches, werewolves, vampires, strange history, anything like that. And I just bring it back to life by telling you guys the story. And this kind of came about because my kids asked me one day, what does Friday the 13th, what does that even mean? Like, why is it such a special day? And I honestly didn't have a good answer, but I have one now. So let's go ahead and get this party started. The funny thing is like I said, I had no idea what Friday the 13th meant. I just knew that it was a spooky day. It was a day that, most or some tattoo shops like to give a discount, if they tattoo the number 13 on there. And there's a reason for that, and we're going to get to it, don't you worry. But I also found out that there are people out there that actually have a legit fear of Friday the 13th. And that word is parascavadoketriophobia. I'm going to list it below. It's the fear of Friday the 13th. And then you have triskaidekaphobia, which is the fear of number 13. Y'all know I am with pronouncing stuff. My southern accent only allows me to do so much. So there you go. Now, most of the time people are thinking 13 is such an odd number because there's 12 months in a year, there's 12 zodiac signs, there's 12 days of Christmas, there's 12 gods on Olympus, there's 12 labors of Hercules, and there's 12 tribes of Israel. So 12 has always been a sacred number. And then you gotta think about the Last Supper. Yeah, I'm gonna bring up some Christianity on you guys. The Last Supper had 13 people, but as most people know, the 13th person turned out to be a rat, and then thus leaving them with 12 disciples instead of the 13. Basically, 13 was considered a bad number because 12 had more of a numerical value, basically. So everybody's like, okay, 13, super strange, right? All right. Well, like I said, in Christianity, the Last Supper was on a Thursday, and one of his peoples, Judas, would decide to betray him and turn him over to authorities. And then on the next day, that Friday, Good Friday, was the day he was crucified. Okay. And so we're not sure if it was like a Friday the 13th, but it was on a Friday. So that's why we have some people that we even have people that fear Fridays. Like, I can't even try to say that word. The word is crazy. It's like phobia. I mean, I might have nailed it. I don't know. There's always been a long-standing suspicion that only 12 people should be sat to a table. Like 13, no, that's bad luck. And so the Last Supper, of course, he had 13 people there at his table, and one of them betrayed him, but he knew that was going to happen, like they say. And so that Friday, of course, is associated with Good Friday, but it's a Friday nonetheless. And so this date, this Friday the 13th, really has a lot to do with Christianity in a lot of ways, but it also shows up in other spiritualities and religions as well. Now, also in Christianity, Friday was said to be the day that Eve gave Adam the apple in the Garden of Eden. Yeah, they're saying that happened on Friday. And they also said that Cain killed his brother Abel on a Friday as well. So Friday's just, just weren't all that great. But there was a club that celebrated it. Yes, they did. They were called the 13 Club. Okay, and this was so super interesting to me. Talk about embracing your fear and facing it. That's exactly what they did. So in the 19th century, this New Yorker named Captain William Fowler, it's hard for me to say that word, he wanted to remove the negative stigma around the number 13. Okay, like I said, the rule was to never have 13 to a table, that you should never, basically what they did is they took the rules and they broke them. Okay, for some reason, for the captain, the number 13 was woven into his life. Like, school was number 13. He fought in Civil War battles. He fought in 13 Civil War battles. So 13 was a big part of this guy's life. So he starts a club. Sounds awesome. Their first meeting was September 13th, 1881. That was a Tuesday. It wasn't a Friday, which would have been super cool if it was. But it was just a Tuesday. Tuesday. It was Tuesday the 13th. So what are some of their activities, you may ask, as the 13th Club? Well, I shall tell you. So they dined regularly on the 13th day of every month, okay? In the room 13 of the Knickerbocker Cottage, which was a bar that Fowler had owned from 1863 to 1883. So it was his place. You know, he's like, we'll go to room number 13, sit 13 people down at the table. But not only that, they would sit for a 13-course meal at a table covered in salt. Because you know how, like, you spill the salt and then, so you throw some over your shoulder? They just went on ahead and threw all the salt on the table. Just because, you know, they just had no fear of this 13 number. And so members would go under a ladder that had a banner above it reading something in Latin that I can't say, but it actually means, those of us who are about to die salute you, is basically what it stood for. And so they would walk under a ladder, and above that ladder was that saying, and they would walk under that before they were seated at their table of 13 people, and they would eat their 13-course meal and maybe talk about like 13 topics. I don't know what they would talk about, but I mean, talk about facing your fear, you know. And the cool thing was there's actually some presidents in this club too. Yeah, there was like 4 presidents in this club, and it was Chester Arthur, Grover Cleveland, Benjamin Harrison, and Theodore Roosevelt. I could see why Roosevelt would do that, because he probably didn't have much fear of anything after getting what he got. You know what I mean, like the polio and all that stuff. Now, there's also a story in Norse mythology that is kind of a little bit like the Last Supper, to be honest. When I read it anyway, that's kind of what it sounded like. So in Norse mythology, there was a dinner party for 12 gods. Okay, 12 gods were invited to this party. They were the only ones allowed and asked to come, and so those 12 went. Well, number 13 person shows up, who is Loki, the god Loki. And he shoots the god of joy and happiness, Baldar, with a mistletoe-tipped arrow, okay? And so that's also in, you know, a little bit more spiritual folklore there for you when it comes to these gods and goddesses and stuff like that. You know, they only wanted 12 at their table as well, so they didn't invite Loki. Loki got mad, and Loki shot an arrow, mistletoe-tipped arrow, because mistletoe is very poisonous, and you know, killed the joy, basically, of the day. And so there's the Norse mythology link. So in 1907, somebody writes a book called Friday the 13th. And no, it's not about the guy at the lake, at the camp, and all that fun stuff. We're gonna get there, okay? But no, it's not about that at all. It's actually pretty nifty. It was written in 1907 by a man named Thomas Lawson. And the novel was called Friday the 13th. And it was about a New York City stockbroker who plays on superstitions about the date to create chaos in Wall Street. And the book was a huge hit. And so this kind of verified everybody's little bit scaredness of Friday the 13th. It kind of intensified it because somebody wrote this book and it was such a hit that now I was like, oh, maybe the Friday the 13th is like a superstitious day and like all this other kind of stuff, you know? I just thought that was interesting. I've never read the book, but I actually wouldn't mind reading it. I have plenty of Audible credits. I should probably just get it and listen to it. So the horror movie, Friday the 13th. Yes, we're going to talk about Jason Voorhees at Crystal Lake. And yeah, that comes out, okay? Now, it was released in 1980 and it introduced us, like I say, to Jason, who's wearing a hockey mask and blah, blah, blah. This is one of the best known examples of the superstitious day. You know, he comes on Friday the 13th. It's super scary. You know, the movie made multiple sequels, comics, video games, other related merchandise, along with Halloween costumes. I mean, everybody knows about Friday the 13th. And they made so many movies over and over and over about this. And so that also solidified a lot of people's fear in Friday the 13th, that they're either scared it's a bad luck day or something terrible is going to happen on that day. There's quite a few things in history that go along with Friday the 13th too. Things that happened on Friday the 13th that are incredibly memorable. And one of those things is Philip IV of France had arrested hundreds of the Knights Templar. This was October 13th in 1307. And the Knights Templar was a really powerful religious and military. They were put in place to protect the Holy Lands, okay, around the area. And the Templar was arrested and imprisoned on various charges. The king really just wanted their money. They had a good money situation going. The Knights Templar did. And so the king basically trumped up a bunch of charges to put hundreds of these people in jail so that he could take over their money situation. That's all there is to that. And many of the Templars were executed because this king was just super greedy. And that's just super sad. So there's a man named Sam Patch. Yep. And he made his name on a Friday the 13th. He sure did. It was October 17th, 1829. He was a daredevil type dude. Okay. He loved to jump off of high stuff and into like rivers and, you know, jump off waterfalls. And he liked to do all this stuff because it was fun for him or whatnot. Which is totally fine. So he was born around 1800, and this is before like the superstition was really like in people's head. At this point, it's just Friday the 13th. And so when Sam was a child, he was a mill worker, and he loved to leap off the dams of the mill. And so he loved the adrenaline rush, and so he started doing stunts for money. And it made him, when he went over the falls of Niagara, because he did, and that made a name for himself because he survived that. He went over Niagara Falls, he jumped off some cliff over there by Niagara Falls and, you know, made it to the other side in the 1800s, which that's an awesome feat in my opinion, you know. You did good on that, bro. He had to go bigger though. And less than a month later, Patch arrives to the Genesee River, the Genesee River, and the Genesee River Falls, and he was gonna jump off the cliff into the falls, and it's just gonna, you know, just be like an everyday, like he always does, you know, leaping off things onto other things, and so that's what he does. But the only thing is, he shows up drunk, okay? He shows up a little bit wasted still from the night before, Yeah, that's not a good thing. And when he jumps off the cliff, evidently he doesn't really see how far away he should jump, because as soon as he hit the water, he was gone. Like, they don't know exactly what happened. They don't know if it was like there were rocks under there, or if it was too shallow, or if he didn't jump out far enough. But that was Sam's last jump. Yeah. His very last jump. He passed away, and that happened on a Friday the 13th. I got quite a few Friday the 13th stories, so I hope you guys are ready. So, during World War II, Buckingham Palace got tore up, okay? Let me tell you, Nazi Germany was really, really messing with them, like big time, hardcore. And so they were dropping bombs on Buckingham Palace. And it started against the UK, targeting London. The palace was actually hit like 16 times by bombs during World War II, but it still stood, okay? It still stood. But the most destructive one was on Friday, September 13th, 1940. Queen Elizabeth and King George VI were at tea when 5 bombs hit the palace, okay? 3 people were injured and 1 died. And of course, the palace survived, absolutely, which is incredible. A place that gets bombed 16 times and it's still standing after all that. I have new respect for Buckingham Palace now. I really do. I'm just saying. So then we go to Kansas, okay? Kansas, they got a lot of floods. And all of a sudden one day, on July 13th of 1951, it had been raining since July 9th. So 10 days it had been raining. No, not 10. I can't do math. Forget that. Like 4 days. It had been raining. It rained so much it brought 16 inches of rain to Kansas. Yes, that's a lot, because as you know, Kansas is pretty flat. There's really nothing for it to go and run off to or anything like that, you know? And so it's been raining since July 9th, and it brings 16 inches of rain. And on that Friday the 13th, the records were broken. In Topeka, Kansas, the water rose 41 feet. That is a lot of water, okay? I'm just saying, that's a lot of water. And it was 14 feet above flood stage. So it was 6 foot higher than any flood had ever been measured in that state on that day. Okay, Topeka was flooded, and in Lawrence and Manhattan, Kansas, the business district was completely flooded with 8 foot of water. The single worst day of flood destruction in the Midwest to that date. As a matter of fact, 28 people died and 500,000 were displaced until the waters receded. The flood made $935 million in damage. That's for back then. Today, that would be $6.4 billion in damages. Just think about that. That is so much water. It's so much damage in the millions back then, and today it'd be in the billions. Now, on Friday, June 13th of 1952, we have a Cold War situation, okay? The Soviet Union shot down a Swedish, good Lord, I cannot talk today, y'all. Shot down a Swedish plane, okay? And the Swedes were just up there on a training flight. They weren't even doing anything. They weren't up there trying to hurt anybody or anything like that, you know. And they were just on a training flight. But the Soviets were like, no, not having it. Shot them down. Well, then the Soviets tried to say, oh, we didn't do that. You know, we didn't bomb a plane full of people that were minding their own business. No, we didn't do that. But then the plane shows up. Pieces, chunks of this plane, okay, show up, right? And a rescue plane was sent, and it was also shot down by the Soviets. Give me a break. When I read this story, I was mind blown, okay? It's like they're just trying to rescue the people you screwed up shooting the first time, and now you're just gonna kill some people that are trying to rescue these other people? You've gotta be freaking kidding me right now. But that's what happened. They shot it down. Now, in 1991, they finally admitted to it. 1991, from 1952 to 1991, the Soviets were like, we did not shoot that plane down, and we didn't shoot down the rescue plane either. But then they come back and they're like, okay, yeah. In 2003, they found the wreckage in the Baltic Sea floor of, the plane, and then they identified 4 crew members, and then the other 4 were not identified. They could not find them, couldn't find their bodies, couldn't find anything. They never found the other 4. So they killed 8 innocent people, unfortunately. So one night on March 13th, a lady gets killed in her own bar, and nobody does anything about it. Okay. Yeah, there were people there, patrons, if you will. But no, nobody helped this lady. And her name is Kitty Genovese. And she was stabbed and R-worded by Winston Mosley, a total stranger. The attack lasted a half an hour, and 38 people witnessed it and did nothing. Did nothing. Didn't call the police, didn't go outside for help, just sat there, kept eating, drinking, doing whatever people do. Might as well put a damn iPhone in their hand, am I right? They actually teach this in psychology now, okay? It's called the bystander effect, or Kitty Genovese syndrome. They actually named it after this girl because I don't think anything like this had ever happened until this happened to poor Kitty. How can this be going on and nobody do anything, is what everybody was wondering. They're like just completely and utterly bewildered. And this, of course, happened on, like I say, Friday the 13th. And to complicate it a little bit more, I know that I said there were 38 witnesses, but somebody fudged that just a little bit, because it wasn't 48 or 38 people there. No, there was not. It was also said that Kitty was already passed before the ambulance arrived. So evidently somebody called, but they weren't quick enough, evidently, but there were still people that were standing around not doing anything to help this lady, which makes zero freaking sense to me in every way, shape, and form. No sense. Makes no sense. Most of these people would say that they just only saw snippets of what was happening. I don't know. I'm just as bewildered as you are. They would say that they saw, but then they turned away. We all know that's not true. Every one of us stares at a car wreck when we go by. If something's happening and going down, there's a ruckus, everybody's looking. I don't care what you say. You're not gonna look and be like, cool. This is just, that's just me, but and this is in the 60s. There were no cell phones yet. Yes, I know they couldn't call the police, but at least nobody was filming this shit like they would now. I'm just saying, people would. And then others would say they just didn't understand the gravity of the situation. They didn't understand that, that she had really needed help. I guess they thought she had a handle on things. I don't know. This is one of the weirdest things I ever read about Kitty. This poor lady and all these people in her establishment do nothing. Make it make sense. So now we're going to move to Bangladesh. Yes, because November 13th in 1970, a cyclone hit Bangladesh and killed 300,000 people. 300,000 people. That's a lot of people to pass away from a freaking... The winds were 115 miles per hour, they say. Okay? That's some hell of wind right there. That's all I gotta say about that. That's insane. And the landfall was actually on a Thursday night. And it was what the storm brought behind it on the 13th, that Friday. That's what killed a lot of people. The flooding and all of that stuff. That is what ended up hurting a lot of people, was the aftermath of what happened. The storm was equal to a Category 3 hurricane and hit through the night. Like I said, the storm surge brought devastation on the 13th. The storm picked up the Bay of Bengal in the ocean and basically pushed it onto land, which I've seen happen down there in Mobile. Being born down there and all that other stuff, the bay will be picked up and will be dumped somewhere else. It's happened before. And so that's what happened, though. Only this is in Bangladesh. And the surge was 16 foot high of just like water just coming. So people were climbing trees to get away. They were doing what they could. And, a lot of them obviously lost their lives, because you just can't run from that much water. You just can't. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen that movie. I think it's called Alive. It's the older version of the Snow Society, which is a newer version of what I'm fixing to tell you, okay? So in October of 1972, okay, we have the Uruguayan Old Christians Club rugby team boarding a plane to go for a game in Chile, all right? The plane crashed into the Andes mountain peak, and it crashed on a really high altitude snowfield. Okay, now, not all of them died. No. It was the beginning of survival for the 27 of the original 45 passengers that survived the crash, okay? There was no food. All of their water was frozen, okay? You gotta think, this is terrible, okay? They send planes out to go find them, but they don't go the right place. They can't find these kids, and they're having to bury their friends, and all this other stuff. It's really sad. It's a really sad situation. And not only they're burying them, they're also having to eat some of their friends, because, they have to stay alive. There's no animals this high up. There's nothing but snow. If you eat snow, you'll be hypothermic in like minutes, And so they go through so much, like snowstorms and blizzards and like all this stuff. If you haven't seen either one of those movies, you really should watch it. It is absolutely insane. They made a makeshift like little water melting device to have water. And like I said, they ate pieces from their friends, but it wasn't like they tried to do it in the nicest way possible. I know that sounds messed up, but they did respect the bodies while they were doing this. They're just doing this to survive, okay? And so, but then an avalanche comes and hits their plane, which is their shelter. And this avalanche hits and it kills 8 more of the 24 that was already left, okay? And so other things took people's lives, whether it was them being cold or dying of starvation or dehydration. Rescues came only after 2 survivors made the trip to go and find help. They left the plane, left their friends, bundled up as good as they could, took as much friend jerky as they possibly could, and they went to go find help. And after 72 days, 16 survivors were rescued on December 23rd of 1972. But the wreck did happen on a Friday the 13th. It sure did. And what's really weird is another plane wreck happened the exact same day as this one did. So like I said, on that same exact day in another airport, there was another plane crashing. Only it killed over 100 people. So in Moscow, near the Sheremetyevo airport in Russia, the plane was carrying 164 passengers and 10 crew members, and it flew into the ground going 385 miles per hour. bro, why are you going so fast? I mean, that's just crazy. It just like went off the runway. Something went terribly wrong. They're saying it could have been a mechanical issue, or it could be because of a lightning strike. That maybe the crew couldn't really delegate that well, but that happened and it killed everybody on board. Now, another one, Tupac died on Friday the 13th. Sure did. And I knew that one only because I'm a huge Tupac fan. I mean, I grew up, on that stuff. So, Tupac dies on September 13th of 1996. Oh my God, I was a freshman in high school. I'm so old. So poor Tupac, we all know he gets caught in a drive-by shooting, and he dies on Friday the 13th in September of his injuries, unfortunately. Then we have, in Buffalo, New York, they get one of the biggest blizzards they've ever had, on the weirdest day, which is October 13th of 2006. This is not that long ago. At least not to me, okay? So, the Friday the 13th blizzard in Buffalo, New York gets lots of snow, but not in October. And that's what happened. On October 13th in 2006, the towns of Depew and Alden got 24 inches of snow in October. 24 inches, just 2 foot of snow. That's insane. 1 million people, wow, lost power from the limbs just snapping and being heavy and wet, because the trees were still in fall mode, And so when snow covered them and ice, it made these branches way heavier, and then they fell. And then that was breaking power lines, destroying people's houses. It was just a huge, crazy mess. So yes, in 2006, they did have one of the biggest blizzards there, super early in the year. And it was very, very devastating for all these people that lost so much of their power and all that fun stuff. But the next one is absolutely nuts. Okay, it's nuts. Some of this y'all might remember. This is about a cruise ship that went down. Okay, so January 13th, this is in 2012. A cruise ship was taking off from the Tuscan coast, and it turned chaotic quick as the Costa Concordia cruise ship struck a reef and began to tilt. Yes, this is not a good thing. Not a good thing at all. At first, the passengers got off by lifeboat. They just started putting passengers in lifeboats, because they weren't that far from land. I don't think they were that far out. I don't know, maybe they were. But to everybody's surprise, after 19 hours, they got the ship off the reef, okay? The crazy thing is that, okay, so first they had a bunch of the people in lifeboats. And then the ship came to rest on its side in shallow water, so survivors had to be airlifted to shore by helicopter. 32 people did die in this. Now, after 19 hours, they got the ship off the reef. Okay, and this is the bonkers part, I'm going to tell you. The captain of the ship, Francesco Schettino, I'm hoping that's how I say that, okay, was arrested for manslaughter and abandoning ship instead of directing people on where to go when they were evacuating. Yeah, instead of this captain going down with his ship, he's like one of the first people off. Legit. I'm not kidding. He was one of the first people off this boat. He was like, no, not today, not doing it. But no, so 32 people ended up dying because this man did not continue doing his job. Everybody knows the captain goes down with the ship. The captain's the last to come off the ship. He is responsible for all the passengers on that ship. So yeah, dude's in jail now for that. So, and like I was telling you guys earlier now, and we're going to get kind of in the around now time. So like tattoo shops have, you know, some days on Friday the 13th, sometimes they have deals where you go in and you get the number 13 tattooed on you in some way, whether it's inside of a picture or something like that. You get this done. And the reason people get the number, you're probably like, why would they go and get the number 13 tattooed on them? It's unlucky, right? You know, I just told you guys all these stories and here we are. But in some cultures, having the number 13 on your body is basically like giving the middle finger to bad luck. It's like, okay, well, I'm already wearing a 13, so you can't get past that. It's almost like Oliver Peck, actually, he put it best. He said, bad luck would come your way. It would see the number 13, see that bad luck is already there, and it would pass on by. That's word for word what he said. Okay, so and that does kind of make sense to me. It's like the guys that created the 13 Club. If you face your fear of this 13, this supposedly really scary number, you know, then and you put it on your body somewhere, then you're going to be fine. Luck will be like, oh, she's already having bad luck, so I'm just going to go over here to this other person just because you have that. I mean, I'm not saying you have to believe it. I'm just telling you that other people believe this. So I feel like I'm saving the best for last because this was a Friday the 13th. In February 1970, Black Sabbath releases their very first album. Excuse me. And it's the first major heavy metal record that's ever been put out. Like, this is a new kind of music. This is a new kind of rock. Black Sabbath. Yes. They put their first CD out, or album, excuse me. You know, disc, record, all that fun stuff. They put that out, and it hit like, of course, we all love and respect Black Sabbath, and rest in peace, Ozzy. Also, I actually forgot to tell you guys about these soldiers in World War I who experienced a White Friday, December 13th, 1916. Some avalanches fell from Mount Marmara, where 270 soldiers died because the avalanche hit their base, basically. And they were still forced to stay there because I don't think anybody could go and get them. So those people were forced to stay in a place that was covered in snow, basically, until they could figure out how to get out from underneath it. Yeah. Just left them there. Left the bodies of people. That's a lot. That's a lot of bodies. Just saying, it's so many freaking bodies. But those are a lot of the significant dates throughout history of Friday the 13th and the crazy things that can happen on Friday the 13th. It's not always a bad day. You know, it's really just like any other day. I see why people are afraid of it. I am blindsided by the fact that there's an actual phobia of the number 13 and of Friday the 13th and of Friday. I guess you can have a phobia of anything, right? So is Friday the 13th an unlucky day for you? Or is it one of the luckiest days for you? For me, I would say I like Friday the 13th because they always put out new like scary movies, and that's all I watch is scary movies or documentaries. Like Point Blank Range, that's all I ever watch. I love them. So if you've had any kind of crazy experience happen on Friday the 13th, definitely let me know below because I would love to hear your stories if anything crazy has happened to you. I know it is an absolutely crazy day, and there's a lot of history behind it, and I'm really glad that my kids asked me that question because I honestly had no idea. I hope you guys like the new hair. Yeah, I changed it up a little bit because It's been a year since my dad passed, and I needed to do something that didn't require me spending money. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I'm so sorry that it took me so long to get this out, but there are more to come, so stick around and please give me a follow if you don't mind, and I hope you have a great day, and I love you.